Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Lunch on Us. I'm Ida Nadira, and this is a show where we'll be discussing some of the latest happenings in Selangor and beyond. So today we'll be talking about the recently tabled 2025 Selangor budget, which was tabled on November 15 by the Menteri Besar, Datuk Seri Amiruddin Syahari. And the funds this time allocated for the budget was RM3 billion ringgit. Now, before we go into detail on that, joining us today is Amasha, Assistant News Editor, Selangor Journal.
Hello.
And we have Daniel Zulkifli, sorry, Senior Journalist, Selangor Journal. And our guest for today, Chief Economist, Dr. Afzanizam. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yes. So today we're going to be talking about the state budget. Usually, I think a lot of economists, they would go discussing about the federal budget.
Right.
But I think the state government of Selangor has made significant progress in terms of the economy of the country. And you also had your own projection based on the recently tabled budget, right?
Yeah.
So based on your projection, you said that the state's GDP contribution to the national GDP is 26.4% in 2025, and the first Selangor plan, RS1, actually initially they projected 30%, but in the midterm review they reduced it to 27%. So why not? Can you share with us what Selangor should do to spur the growth for to cover that gap?
Right. Thank you for having me in this program. Well, my impression for Selangor budget, when I look through at the numbers, when I look through at the budget speech, I was amazed to know Selangor state government is almost debt-free. That really caught my attention. It's something that I would say our federal government would love to achieve at some point in the not too distant future, perhaps. So I think with that in mind, that would essentially give a lot of space for the Selangor state government to actually plan ahead in terms of what are the expenditure to be spent on, what are the particular areas that need to be focused on. So it gives a lot of freedom for the state government to plan. So yeah, that's my first impression, and therefore I think on that note, perhaps we shall expect a better growth ahead for the states.
Is that also why I think you mentioned, there was a note that you shared with us before you came over. You mentioned that you see this state budget as an expansionary budget. Is it because partly due to the fact that Selangor is not in debt anymore, for example, so they have more funds to actually spend on the people?
Right. Yeah, I think the notions of expansionary budget came because when I saw that the fiscal balance actually in the deficit balance 650 million. While the word deficits will always commonly associate to something that's quite negative, I think in Selangor case that's not the case, because like I said in my earlier speech, I think Selangor is almost debt free. Right? So that gives us this space. So on that note, I think the Selangor government can actually plan and to spend more to actually generate more growth. And if you look at the growth trends for Selangor economy, it's always above from the national level.
Correct.
So taking into considerations that going forward with Trump administration will be much more prominent in 2025, and perhaps there could be some headwinds from the external sector, I think it's only right for state government to plan an expansion fiscal budget for the year ahead.
Doctor, if I may, I mean, looking at the state budget, of course, it's an expansionary budget. But then again, I think the most common thing that's missing that people always asking for in terms of budget, federal or state, is, well, goodies. Or something for the people, the common people, like the cash handouts or even tax break or something of the sort. But it seems like they're moving away from that. They're spending more towards development expenditure, infrastructure. Do you think that is the right move overall?
Right. I think, people were actually hoping for goodies or immediate cash handouts. Those are common things to expect from the government, and I think they are doing that. But I think going forward, it's about how we should build the nations, and that would mean spending on capacity building is very key.
Correct, yeah.
because the landscape of the economy keeps on changing. The landscape of the industries keeps on changing. We talk about artificial intelligence is likely to displace workers in a quite significant way. That would require our government to prescribe an intervention that our youngsters, our graduates would actually be able to withstand these challenges. So that means the government needs to plan in terms of the spending on development.
So you would say that this is a good move to actually...
I think it's a good move, and I think it's something that I've been carefully thought by the administration.
If I can just add, it's a good move, and I think it's a right move as well.
Right.
So like, it's not just state government. I mean, if you look at federal government as well, so they are doing more targeted subsidies now. I think like with RON 95 soon, diesel has already been done, and then electricity as well. And we see a lot more programs that are more focused on helping people to generate income. So we have like initiative Pendapatan Rakyat, I think that's one. So, and I mean, I've heard like from the state government as well, they have like plans to move towards those kind of approach instead of just like giving direct cash in hand. And I think that's good. You're just not helping them by giving them one-off payment, but help them generate income.
Because I think it's proven under Kementerian Ekonomi to, like you said, IPR, the Insentif Pendapatan Rakyat, especially on Intan, which is revolving around agriculture. So we can see all those B40, when they participate in this program, they would able to bump up their income through a better ways of agricultural practices, through more high-tech, kind of agricultural methods, especially on fertigasi. So I think it's proven. So on that note, I think while last time we love to coin this cash transfers as the a triumph for any policies, but I think the going forward ways of doing things is to focus on capacity building.
But for rakyat, just curious, let's say I'm a voter, right? So like, if I'm watching a budget, I won't be, I mean like you and Economist, for example, and we do the reporting and those kind of things, we do analysis and all that. So of course we see these kind of things as something positive from the state government. But like for the common citizens, they may be like, oh, I want, if only there had been like a 500 ringgit, like bonus or some sort for all Selangor citizens.
It's less populist, so...
Yeah. So like how will this affect like state government in terms of being popular among the people? Because they have to balance between being popular as well as, doing what's best for the state actually.
Well, I think you need to look at from the general ecosystems. At the federal level, we have programs like Sumbangan Tunai Rahmah, Sumbangan Asas Rahmah. You can see that at the federal level, the allocation for that cash transfers program has been increased from 10 billion to 13 billion. So that would benefit the entire ecosystem that includes our state citizens. And along with that narratives, there's development spending. So I think we need to see, perhaps to educate our citizens that when it comes to development programs, we need to see the in a holistic manner, because we are looking at a government where we have federal level, state, and also local council. So with that in mind, I think then the move towards development will be more holistic, in a sense.
Right. Okay. So the state budget, the theme for this year, for next year, is actually a dynamic Selangor, an ideal quest for a civil Malaysia. So we've talked about GDP contribution and about moving away from popular initiatives, but then maybe you can enlighten what's the components in the state budget that actually makes it a dynamic Selangor per se.
Well, the basis is of course moving away from a populist stance. They're looking towards develop more major strategic projects. Power plants, you have opening up new economic zones in several different regions in the state, not to mention attracting and establishing more complex industries like semiconductor, and now they're pushing for IC design to come here. And even, I think at one point they're still considering, but very cautious about attracting more data centers into the state, although that's a very important ecosystem to the semicon. And the best part is that holistically the state understand that they're not competing with other states like Penang, which have already established semiconductor industry. It's like we all complement one another, and because we're kind of small, it's in the whole entire ecosystem that we were looking towards to complement. I think one of the major components is also sustainability in terms of fiscal responsibility. So I think the last couple of years, at least when Datuk Sri Amrin takes office, he's trying to find better ways to increase revenue to the state, diversifying as best as possible. I think one of his most, I would say, very out there idea is basically getting a proportion of the corporate tax back to the state. Yeah, so he's very, I know for a fact he's very passionate about the matter. He's been asking and trying to find, not just for Selangor, actually for all. So if I can get a chunk, you also should get a chunk. So just wondering, in terms of that perspective, your perspective, Doctor, since they're moving away from traditional land transactions and collecting fees from local councils and whatnot, so what other means you think they should implement?
My observation is that I think there's this growing trend of asking for more autonomy among the states in Malaysia. I think that's probably the right move, because perhaps the state would have a better understanding about the needs of their rakyat. Yeah? And at federal level, perhaps it's too centralized, and along the way there would be some bureaucracy that could actually impede how those assistance can actually be given out to the states. So perhaps the point that you are alluding is towards having more autonomy. And I think these are an ongoing discussion, and I think like our fellow in Sarawak will have more active discussion in this respect. But I think this perhaps the way forward lah, to have more autonomy in terms of how the states can actually have more resources to plan and spend on their respective jurisdictions.
Just for context, I can also add to what Dan had said earlier. So the state actually during the recent budget tabling, MB did mention about their plans to generate more income for next year. So for example, they mentioned about getting more from state GLCs to contribute more to the state profit-making GLCs, obviously. And then they also have plans like environmental policies like this zero discharge policy, polluter pay principle and all that. So those are like, you will get, maybe a couple of 100 million back into the state. But like, because you mentioned about how more autonomy from the federal government. But I mean, from Putrajaya's point of view, obviously they want to maintain as much of that income to themselves. So like, which industries or sector do you see potentially maybe that the state could give, the federal government could give like more autonomy to the states?
Well, I guess perhaps the hierarchy, perhaps if you look at the main industries lah. I think if you look at the semiconductor, perhaps that could be the low-hanging fruits, perhaps. I mean, the government is actively looking at how to establish a new IC design park in Cyberjaya, right?
Yes.
Next IC design park. So that would mean there will be a lot of potential revenue collection that it can be garnered from that particular areas. So perhaps it's only right that perhaps within the area, the state government will be allowed to have some fair share in terms of their revenues.
And it's only fair because Selangor contributed the most to the national economy.
Right.
Because I think there's this, there's this perception that, or thinking that, why would, let's say, the state with the most contribution to the federal government, but they only receive like just a small portion, because a lot of these funds are actually being transferred to states like Kelantan, Terengganu to help their development over there.
I think the underlying issue perhaps is about efficiencies lah. Because time is obviously not in our side. Like I said, things keeps on changing, and therefore we need to spend quickly, and not just quick and speed, but I think it has to be productive. So we need to have that multiplier effect to be materialized, to be crystallized in no time, So by cutting down all this bureaucracy by way of more autonomy, perhaps is the right thing to do.
All right. Sure.
Okay. So speaking of efficiency, now one of the policy that the state government introduced is actually the Speed Selangor policy, which is actually a policy they introduced for ease of doing business. So this includes reducing the approval period for planning permits for industrial areas from 3.5 months to 14 days, which, what do you think about that? Do you think it's achievable to actually reduce it that much?
It has to start somewhere.
Okay.
But I remember in 2017 there was one paper written by the economists or researchers in Banegara. One of the title is about rethinking the investment incentives.
Okay.
So they talk about incentives, tax incentives especially, And the key points that they want to highlight is that foreign investors, when they come and invest in a particular country, yes, tax incentives matters, but beyond tax, they will look at ease of doing business, especially their experience lah. When they come here, perhaps more clarity in terms of the procedures, bureaucracy. So I guess by setting up this initiative would actually help to have a seamless experience lah by foreign investors when they come and invest in Malaysia. Like in banks, we always talk about customer centricity. That's perhaps the analogy lah here in terms of how state government could actually attract investors.
But I wonder, what are if any complaints were to be made by investors, what are the main things that they would look, especially in Malaysia? What do they wish to be reduced or removed? What could help them make business easier for them?
I recall that paper they mentioned about the number of agencies, investment promotion agencies, IPA, in Malaysia. That was 2017 now. They have like 32 IPAs.
32, oh my God.
Yeah, just imagine the amount of bureaucracy that they need to face. You see? Yeah.
So you believe that by cutting down, for example, the time to obtain, for example, like planning permits and all that, this will actually help attract investors? Or do you think that there are maybe like other things that investors actually more interested in instead of just like the cutting down of that period?
Yeah, I think definitely making sure that their seamless experience is very important, and I think there's also a limitation for us as a country to compete based on taxes. I think this at the global stage there's this move to what I call a global minimum tax of 15%. So I think there's a limit for any country to compete based on tax to attract investors. So on that note, prescribing more tax incentive, perhaps there's a limitation. So beyond that, for us to attract, obviously through all these means, to portray that we have a very efficient government machineries when it comes to dealing with them.
So it seems like the state government is taking the right step, in various areas. But for the opposition, they said that the state government is handling the economy. The handling of the economy is quite poor, so that's why they need a supplementary budget.
I saw that
now.
Yeah,
so but the Menteri Besar actually provided some data, in terms of the annual economic growth and the state reserves. From the outside, Dr. Nizam, how do you see Selangor's performance?
I think if you look at the GDP trend, Selangor will always outpace the national level.
Correct.
By a factor of 1.3. So you have a 5% national GDP growth, they just time with 1.3 times lah. So we get more than 5% growth all the time. So that's always been the case. That goes to show that the speed of the growth of the Selangor's economy is much higher compared to the national level. And of course, in terms of the share of the economy at the national level is like more than one quarter. So on that note, I think Selangor's contribution is very prominent. I mean, if you look at key sectors like logistic, aviation, education, is very well entrenched and well connected to at the federal level. So I think.
Where do you think? I mean, because when we were watching for example, the debates and all that, and I remember during the winding up speech by MB, there was a lot of back and forth between the MB and former MB Datuk Seri Azmin Ali. And Azmin keeps saying, that when I was the MB, the figure was this, and then our MB saying, but when I am here now, the figure is this, and this. And when we compare the figures, we know that now Selangor is performing better in terms of reserves, state reserves, in terms of GDP growth, or even the economic contribution to the national economic pie. So, where do you think that idea came from the opposition that, under Datuk Seri Amiruddin, you're actually not doing really well?
I guess that's politics. They would have to, compete. Perhaps it's a healthy competition, I hope. It will create more debate in terms of what are the good policies that need to be prescribed. And I think the numbers says it all. Like I said in my earlier remarks, when I saw that the state government is almost debt-free, it's really caught my attention. To me, wow, I think if we were to rate Selangor in terms of credit ratings, perhaps it's a AAA rating. So from the capital markets point of view, I think Selangor is can actually tap capital markets for funding if they want to.
I think we need to cut this scene and send to Datuk Sri.
Alright, we're going to talk a bit about how Selangor wants to standardize minimum wage. Okay, so as the most developed state one of the most developed state in the country, and being one of the state that has the highest cost of living, right? Do you think Selangor should take the first step in implementing a living wage instead of a minimum wage?
Right. Talk about wages is very touchy subject because it involves cost of doing business, and we know at this current juncture, the business are also facing quite a big challenge in terms of dealing with on the cost side. I think minimum wage essentially try to address inefficiencies in the labour markets.
Correct.
Because if you don't do that, I mean, if the government does not intervene, then you wouldn't have that flaw. And if you allow the market to decide, then you know it's going to be very, very low. So on that note, minimum wage really helps. And now I think the Kementerian Economy is looking at the progressive wage policies, which is an ongoing affair. So I think we shall see what's the outcome. But I think coming back to wage, how should we frame the discussion? I think it's about, my take is that you need to look at the ecosystem again. I observe at the national level, the number of unionized labour workers is dwindling. In 1982, the percentage of unions labour is about 11%. In the 90s, it was around 9%. Last year is about 6.2%.
Oh, that's bad.
So it's in declining. So that goes to show the voice of the labour may not be heard. If you talk about industries, any industries now, automotive, they have like Malaysia Automotive Association. I think properties, they have radar and whatnot. They can, bring up their voice to the authorities and air their whatever concerns they have. So I think the same MO should be applied for the labours. So perhaps on this note, it's something that perhaps the state government would like to look at in terms of perhaps to promote more a unionised labour, so that how the wage is being set will be more transparent, will be more fair, and government can play their role as a balancing act between the employers and the employees.
I can be just a devil's advocate because I know in Malaysia's approach is that we're not a labour-orientated country in many ways, which cause a lot of structural issues along the way as well. But then we would argue if you have more labour unions, then that would affect ease of doing business. So there's that clash. So what's your take?
True. That's why I think the role of the government is to become the mediator, to become the reference point. Because on one hand, we want to protect the rights of the labour, and on the other hand, to make sure that the business remain viable. And the government has put a target under Malaysia's economy, the compensation on employees, the share of wages in the economy to be around 45%. At the current juncture, it's about 33% last year. So from 33% to 45%, something has to happen. And there must be an active intervention. Yes, minimum wage, progressive wage policies. What else? So I think perhaps it's only right to revisit the strategy on labour unions. I'm not saying that you should have more unions. No, it has to be calculated. It has to be very measured. So I mean, ultimately, it's about how the labour can become more productive and will result in better earnings for the companies.
If I just can add one more question to that, Doctor, we actually spoke about this just briefly outside before we came in, and we spoke about how when the government announced the increase in minimum wage to 1,007, and then I think it was a couple of days ago there was a statement or something, announcement by insurance companies that it will be increased by I think up to 40%, and there was a lot of noises on social media. A lot of people were not happy with that, because then prices of goods increase. So like, what's the difference if the minimum wage increases when all the other items also increase? So like in that context, like what can the government do? Because you did mention about how government shouldn't be like controlling everything, but overseeing. But like in this matter, like what can the government do to help ease the burden on the rakyat? Because increasing the wage alone, I don't think is enough.
Yeah, I think it's a known strategy lah. In the immediate terms, they will look at things like cash transfers. I think cash transfers is a must.
Okay.
Because immediately because of a high cost of living, the one who are in the middle and also the low income will be affected. So we need that transfers as a means to actually to mitigate the impact. But going forward, that revolves around education, healthcare. So very long term, and of course the return on investment will take a while. So on that note, I think maybe one of the KPIs perhaps going forward, the number of recipients of these cash transfers has to be reduced.
Okay.
Reduced not because the government wanted to cut the allocation, no. Reduced because the success of the education policies, for instance, the success of the industrial policies that become more, that makes the economy more vibrant.
Yeah.
So because of this now I think STR recipient is about 9 million people. That's about half now. More than half of our labour force will receive cash aid. So because of this success of these policies, these 9 million recipients will be able to experience this social upward mobility. That should be the KPI. So that will dictate what sort of policy, what sort of measures that would allow this upward mobility to occur.
All right, fair.
Okay. All right, Doctor. So you've actually gone through the state budget, right? And the state also has what I mentioned earlier, the first Selangor plan. And following the midterm review, they are also coming up with the second Selangor plan, which is RS2. Now, they have a lot of things focused not just in the budget, but also in this 5-year blueprint that they have, such as economic zones and also eradicating poverty. So, in your point of view, what do you think the state government should be focusing on for the upcoming RS2, the second blueprint?
Right. I think it definitely will revolve around technology. I cannot imagine how AI is going to be like in next 5 years' time during the RS2, which I suppose will correlate with the 13 Malaysian plans.
Yes, RMK 13.
To 2026 up until 2030. So we can imagine how the application of AI and how it actually shape our labour markets, the business dynamics. So that would actually require an active intervention from the government. So I think it will revolve around on education, and perhaps what are the key areas that could actually become the low-hanging fruits for the government or for this industry to absorb all this excess labour, so to speak. I think one of the key areas is actually technology. And of course, beyond that, areas relating to sustainability. We talk about climate risk. I think in the budget, so we can see the role of the state-owned enterprise, I suppose, like Worldwide Holdings. So I think we shall see more of that to happen. And I think, perhaps on agriculture, smart farming, precision farming, those are the key areas that could actually elevate our income, our society's income, especially in the rural areas.
So like particularly focus on tech, sustainability in this. Because we see RS1, for example, there's a lot of focus, for example, also on economic zones. So they identified there's 4 economic zones currently, Southern Selangor, Northern Selangor and all that. Should this also be maybe perhaps be given special focus in RS1 as a continuation, because MB did say that this will be continued for several years. It's not a short-term project, it's a very long-term project, like Sabda and Sabak Bernam and all that. So how much attention do you think this kind of developments, or how crucial is it for the people's economy as well as the state?
Perhaps having a dedicated economic zone would make the economic development more structured, because it will entail more perhaps urbanization, more of a structured way of doing things in terms of infrastructure, and perhaps also create some degree of competition among the states.
True.
Right.
Yeah.
So that would be something would be healthy, because every state will be competing to get the best of the brains, perhaps best of business or industries. So I think that would be perhaps the approach going forward.
All right.
Like just now you mentioned about artificial intelligence, right? So in this budget alone, the state government is developing its own initiatives to integrate and utilize AI in government services. So then maybe you can share a bit what kind of initiatives that was mentioned in the state budget.
Looking back at the state government's previous initiative is basically they want to digitize the government services. So basically, for example, the most accessible point of engagement with customers or the people is pejabat tanah or front desk counters. So they did the smart box initiative, if not mistaken. So you can and everything is mostly moving online. So I think one of the things that I remember MB mentioned is that if you want to use AI, they want to reduce duplications in processing services, at least for example pejabat tanah, to avoid any duplication of applications. So he said that's one of the things they want to do. However, it's still yet clear of what other initiative or how other applications they can use. But I just want to get your take, Doctor, because we don't know what AI is or the tools, what will happen or what will be used.
You're a huge proponent for AI, Daniel.
I am a huge proponent for AI. But just want to get your take on it, whether that could actually help government services in the long run.
Yeah, I think essentially AI is a form of technology, and in economics we have this theory we call production functions, which means in order to produce you need to have labor, you need to have capital, and you need to have technology. So I like to think AI resides in that technology space lah. So what it will do is that it will improve efficiency, it will improve productivity. So I suppose by embracing AI in government machinery, perhaps it will reduce the amount of requirements for new staff, perhaps. Yeah, because everything will be cut short in terms of the efficiency, and that allow the government to think about how they can deploy all this staff, to be better used, to have a better efficiency, better productivity. So it opens up a lot of opportunities. Perhaps in terms of job scale or perhaps career progressions among the civil servant who want to think about to move into a different departments, perhaps. So it opens up, perhaps, I like to think, more opportunities for the civil servant. Yeah.
Okay. Just now, Amma, he mentioned about regional development, like focusing on the south and the north of Selangor. Now, one of the announcement made is the Kita Selangor rail line. It was first announced in the past state election, right? But in this budget, they actually, the Menteri Besar actually stated that the line will extend, the network will extend to Seremban. So just want to have your take, like, do you think that this is a feasible project? Is it something that the state should actually focus on?
Yeah, I think well, obviously there will be multiplier effect in terms of the projects because it will create a demand for raw materials, and the construction work will actually allows more spillover effects into other sectors like manufacturing, services, and during construction, post-constructions, that will have an impact to the property values and how it will connects the cities and develop the areas. So these are perhaps the angles that they are looking at. But doing it in terms of the feasibility studies, in terms of how it will affect the budgetary constraint and whatnot. So I suppose the because of the state government is very resilient in terms of the financial position, that would allow them to consider these projects. But I think all this project will be always based on PPP concept, the public-private partnership concept. That again also will have a spillover effect to other players within the industries.
So what do you think the benefit would be extending the network all the way to Seremban.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your hometown.
Well, I guess maybe because we want to promote public transports and going forward, there will be less and less internal combustion engines going forward. So having more rail-based mode of transportation would actually help the government to achieve those targets.
And I remember, Doctor, the last time we met, we did talk about the Selangor rail line, and if I remember correctly, you mentioned about how like there's this trend towards moving from working in office to flexible working hours, and you said that whether the state actually took this into consideration, because let's say in 5-10 years time, with AI, tech and all that, more people will work remotely from homes.
Right.
And what this means is that instead of people having to move to Klang Valley, for example, or use the public transportation, they cannot just stay from home to work. So that means less utilization of public transportation. So in the context of government doing this kind of projects, rail projects and all that, like what should they do? What should they consider when building this or developing this kind of project?
I think the angle is to develop the areas that will be affected by that rails lines, because it will accelerate the urbanization process, the creation of township. So these are the spillover effects. Yeah, I think you are right to point out that because of the changing dynamics in terms of how we work today, perhaps there will be not much mobility going forward, but perhaps people still need to move around. We still want to promote tourism. That again would allow some application of public transport along the way. So yeah.
All right, fair.
Okay. All right. When you talk about transportation, one of the initiatives that the state has is Selangor Mobility. All right. If I'm not mistaken, there's aside from the Smart Selangor bus network, there's also the DRT, demand responsive transit. Then, what are the other initiatives under Selangor Mobility?
For the time being, there's three main. Of course, you got Smart Bus Selangor, and you got DRT, and then they're trying to look at how best to. They are looking to establish a mobility lab, and the task of the lab is actually just to establish connectivity between all these public services, especially first and last mile connectivity. But I think they're really going big on DRT because they want to solve the first and last mile connectivity, and not to mention, in a way, try to alleviate traffic congestion in the Klang Valley, which I think is a huge ask from the get-go. That's why they're going big on public transportation. And of course, you have federal projects like LRT3 coming in and whatnot. And if I'm not mistaken, they have 1.1 million ridership in totality of people moving in daily in and out of Selangor alone. But that's what I want to ask your opinion on, Doctor. I mean, first, is DRT a viable option moving forward, at least just to solve the first and last mile connectivity, and how can that help movements in at least in the Klang Valley?
I suppose because how this terminal will be constructed also will take to many considerations, the residential area and whatnot. So perhaps the DRT, I suppose, will actually help to alleviate any needs to create more the stations perhaps. So that would actually reduce the total cost of construction, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one. Another one is sorry. sorry. Just want to get your take, and actually we forgot one major project that I want to ask, which is very bad, actually, is that the state is also going towards renewable energy projects. So you have the one most important is at Pulau Indah Power Plant, and they're also going to waste to energy. So just want to ask Doctor whether you're familiar with these projects and what is its economic benefit to the state overall.
Well, when we talk about renewable energy, it's always about solar panel, large-scale solar farm, for instance, as the commonly associated with renewable energy, and I like to think Selangor perhaps at the forefront when it comes to waste to energy. So I think it's a combination. It's an energy mix within RE space, and I think Selangor is cognizant about the need to have a energy security, and by having more options, not just centralized towards solar and having one WTE, waste to energy, will actually help to meet those objectives.
Because they have actually a couple of projects, WTE projects, I mean, and previously we also talked about, for example, data centers, and you did mention about how this requires a lot of
water
and electricity. And this we could see, because you did mention like how, for example, state will have to focus, like, balancing between providing this electricity and water supply to these industry players, but also as well to the residents.
Right.
So, like, for example, with all this kind of like renewable energy projects, is this sufficient to cater to maybe more data centers popping up in Selangor? Because we spoke to Dato' Sri Amiruddin's press secretary, and he did mention that Selangor is not going down the route like what Johor is doing, which is like every couple of months new data centers here. That they are more selective. In your point of view, what line should government take in terms of data centers? Should they just like
that's the main worry lah. When there is a euphoria on data centers, everyone just go there, and for all we know, it will be excessive, oversupplied. Then suddenly new technology comes in, then it becomes a problem lah. So I think so I think we need to be mindful. The government need to be mindful on that. We don't want to be trapped into this euphoria, and I think the main issue now is about the usage of artificial intelligence will require more data. And that only the data center is a form of infrastructure to support that. So on that space, the state government want to provide those facilities. So I think it's always right to consider the need of it and to strike the right balance.
And how do you respond to this long-standing question about like when AI develops into a more mature product? So that means less requirement to have physical manpower on the ground. So for example, the data centers will be operated digitally, and you don't need as many people working there as normal other factories or companies. So people talk about upskilling and reskilling and all that, but are we heading in that right direction? Because we see now, for example, today gig economy, like delivery riders and all that, these numbers are increasing, but the reskilling, upskilling, I mean, we have not, maybe communication-wise is not as good, but we don't see as much in terms of the end product to that. So where do you see headed?
I think that's right. I think the key question is how do we frame this situation, right? The AI application. I think the AI will actually help a lot in terms of cutting short, in terms of how, let's say, if you want to write something, you don't have to. It's just super fast.
ChatGPT.
Right, ChatGPT, right? So as being a student now, the learning experience has been very different. And the lecturers also having this problem also the challenge is perhaps there could be plagiarism and whatnot lah. So but the point here is it changes how we do things, and of course how we want to ensure that the whatever being applied for AI, for instance, is for the right use, and more importantly how it can actually helps to improve our productivity, and it gives a lot of challenges lah. Because now we are talking about there will be more gig workers going forward.
Correct.
If you look at the numbers of own account workers now, I think it's more than 3 million already. But certainly we want the gig employment not just revolving around just e-hailing and p-hailing, but it's something that's more professionally driven, and the AI will actually help them to do their work. So that should be how we frame the usage of AI.
That's the thing, Doctor. I mean, one of the arguments we say that if we have established more data centers in the country, supposedly access to AI tools would be much more cheaper or lower. But is that a feasible argument overall?
I think it goes back to the accessibility lah, especially among the rural folks, and of course education play an important role, and I think things like subjects relating to STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths should be taught in a manner that is not so difficult. Nowadays, if you look at the syllabus is very tough.
I wouldn't understand all.
Right. So I wonder that actually resonates well with our strategy to embrace AI.
Okay.
Because obviously this will require a lot of mathematics if you want to have more experts in AI. It's a ecosystem.
Aside from AI, one of the focus for the state government's budget next year is also education. So, like for example, this weekend, the state government is launching its very first Selangor Education Summit. So one of the focus for the summit is actually to push forward TVET. And so, like just now you mentioned about integrating TVET and AI together. So what do you think like we can expect or see at this kind of education summit?
Yeah, I think when we talk about higher education, the only things that always pop to our mind is universities, and bachelor's degrees. But in actual fact, it's about education, about knowledge. And we shouldn't be put certain distinction within bachelor's degree and TVET certification, right? But in actual, it's about knowledge. So I think now, for instance, when we talk about agriculture, I think there's a lot of TVET's element there. And I think it's not wrong to actually promote TVET among our perhaps SPM leavers. Not just focusing too much on university. It's about having more variety in terms of choices, in terms of going to a better education system. So I think it's about how we can relate about TVET and how they can make money Because I mean, when you look at agriculture sector, we constantly been recording trade deficits in agro-food. First 9 months of this year, we recorded 30 billion deficits in agro-food. So imagine that if you can address those deficits, it's a big business, you see.
Correct, Billions
of money.
So that is actually one of the, like I said, focusing on TVET at the summit. Datuk Sri Amiruddin actually said that what they want to do is actually open up to the people to see that TVET should be a second choice. That it can actually be a first choice, especially for the SPM.
Should become a mainstream choice.
I remember actually, if I can add to that, Ida. I remember when I was in secondary school. So during our time when there was PMR and all that. So after my PMR, going to Form 4, so they have the science stream and art stream, right? And I was moved to science stream, but I wanted arts. And at that time, I mean, I'm not sure how it works now, but they didn't allow me. They say, oh, you have, because of your grade, you have to take science stream. But sometimes, do you believe that there should be greater flexibility in terms of education system to allow students to do what they like? Because if I don't like science, because in the end I took journalism for my diploma and degree, and I didn't take any like science or maths related subjects. So do you think that there should be greater?
That should be the way, I think we should allow that flexibility, not so regimented. You see, because at the end of the day, it's about human capital. And every human is very unique in their own way, and their skill set, their inclination towards knowledge is different. You can have someone who is good at maths but also good at arts, you see. And for instance, economics. I hate to say this, but nowadays there's a lot of maths in economics, but in actual fact, economics is also art. Because we talk about behavior, we talk about psychology. So there's a non-maths components in economics field, just for an example. So on that note, I think we should allow that flexibility, not just based on purely on achievements, academic achievements, but also taking consideration about the inclination or the tendencies. Because what we want is we want to fully use up the potentials for every human.
How do you think, not just the state government, but even the federal government, how do you think they can push this further? Because the thing is, on paper, it looks good, like having these kind of policies, the summits and whatnot. But at the end of the day, you're talking about changing the mindsets of the parents and even the students. So how do you think we can actually...
Well, there's a lot of angle to look at, obviously. But I think for a start, if I can suggest, we may have to look at the syllabus again. Nowadays, my impression is that it's getting tougher and tougher, and I'm not sure the receptions among the students in terms of all these difficulties will actually allow them to become more creative, to become more innovative. That's one. On the parents' part is obviously to become more supportive and to become more engaged with the schools. At least you participate in the PTA's meeting lah.
Ni PIBG pun tak datang.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we've covered pretty much education and also the economic part, industrial. Now, earlier we mentioned about moving away from social initiatives in a way. So, for example, the state government has Bantuan Kehidupan Sejahtera Selangor, or for short BINKAS, right? So, if they want to move away from this kind of initiatives, right? What kind of alternatives should they offer? But before we get there, maybe you like to enlighten what BINKAS is.
Basically, it's just a cash incentive to get
Just like STR, right?
Just like
Yes.
STR.
I think it's something like 30,000 families giving
300
monthly,
ringgit,
about 300 ringgit. And the whole idea is basically to lift those who are living in poverty out of poverty. And I remember a few months back, MB was saying that they pretty much almost address the issue of hardcore poverty in Selangor. And whatever remaining families who are living in hardcore poverty, they will provide whatever funds remaining from BINKAS to help them to live. But in the recent budget, there was no mention of BINKAS, and state did mention that there will be a new form of initiatives to replace BINKAS. So what kind of aid do you think is best to help? Because we don't want to see a scenario where you stop BINKAS and then all these families who were relying on that aid now falls back into poverty bracket.
Right. I think that's the worrying part lah. If you continue to with these policies, will result in our society to become addictive.
Okay.
And it's hard for them to for the government to actually withdraw that kind of assistance. And therefore become a permanent feature in every budget. So, but I think, I would think that IPR has the incentive pendapatan rakyat has shown good success, clear success in terms of alleviating the poverty and giving more income. And I can see YB Rafizi has started telling the people through the social media platform about the success of IPR. So I think we need to continuously giving all these positive messages that this, for instance, IPR can really help to elevate your income status more sustainably, rather than to rely on constant cash handouts. So it's about messaging, it's about crafting the narratives so that people will actually see the benefits.
We had this discussion with Amma earlier. I mean, of course, they're moving away from cash incentives, but they're also trying to define who are deserving of these cash incentives. So I think federal government is also like, we're trying to do away with B40s, M40s, T20s, and they're trying to redefine that who deserves it more based on their disposable income, for example,
where you live,
where you live. So do you think this is the right move at the very least to make a clearer definition of who needs the help?
This is clearly a race when it comes to policy making. We call it inclusion error or exclusion error.
Okay.
If it's inclusion error, that means the one who are not deserving getting the help, vice versa. So these are the challenges when it comes to cash handouts and whatnot, and therefore it's only right to focus on how we can best to elevate or to promote social outward mobility, so that eventually the recipient of this cash aid will actually graduated from this situation and become more sustainable in terms of their livelihood. So this is always the challenges
From your point of view, when you look at the budget, do you think it's balanced? Like, the initiatives that they presented, social-wise, economy-wise?
Yeah, I
Putting
think
you on the spot.
yeah, it's always good to strike the right balance, lah.
Yeah.
On one hand, you want to ensure that you have the financial capacity, because otherwise you'll be in trouble in terms of relying more on debts. And the other, of course, to ensure that every assistance will hit the target and be able to result in social upward mobility, better livelihood and whatnot. So it's always striking the right balance, lah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. I think that wraps up the show. And now, before we go, you can catch the show, the repeat of the show on Selangor TV YouTube channel and also MediaSelangor social media platforms. And if you want a wrap-up of the state budget, you can go ahead to selangorjournal.my and click on Selangor Journal, where we have the e-paper there, and we have basically summed up the initiatives. Now, that is all from us. Thank you very much. Have a good lunch.
All right, cool. That was
Extended lunch.
Was it 1 hour?
Standing.